Hello, everybody. My name is Professor Rich, and today we're going to look at some English idioms. We're going to look at 6 idioms specifically, and these are quite idiomatic phrases. So, idioms which are a little difficult to understand from the individual words in the phrases. We're going to look at those idioms, look at what they mean, talk about how we use them. Then I'm going to give you some practice in using those idioms. And these are some idioms I quite like, which do have use in conversational English, in business situations, and in education. So if you're watching us live, then hello to you. Hello to Pallavi. Hello to Julia, and hello to Manuel, and others if you've made it over. So let's have a look at the first idiom for today. So the first idiom is you reap what you sow. Notice the pronunciation there. You reap what you sow. That S-O-W is sow. You can see on the right a list of definitions, and you can try to choose which definition you think is the best for this one. I'm going to try and explain the idiom a little bit. So if you look at the picture there, look at the picture. You reap what you sow. So sow is actually when you plant, you prepare the ground and plant seeds. So that's sowing seeds. Throwing the seeds onto ground in order to grow into a plant. And then reap is another word for harvest. And harvest means when you collect the finished product of the plant. So when the plant has finished growing, and then you're taking something from the ground that you gain from that plant. So the reap, the harvest is the collection, and the sow, the sowing is planting the seeds. You reap what you sow. And then you can see a list of definitions here on the right. And I'd like you to choose what you think is the best definition. They are, number 1, react quickly without thinking. Number 2, not able to understand something because you are too involved in it. 3, too many people doing the same thing can cause a bad result. 4, you cannot know what something is really like by appearance. And 5, experience the result of past actions. So which of those do you think is the right definition in this case? Once again, just to let you know what we'll do today, we'll have a look at the 5 expressions. And then after we've talked about the definition for each one, then we'll have a look at ways to use those in real conversation. The main trick with idioms is don't overuse them. They are rare. However, they can be fun and interesting to use in the appropriate situation. Okay? Okay, so which of these do you think is the best option for you reap what you sow? What do you think is the best definition here for this one? Julia's already given us an answer, which I think is correct. So you reap what you sow is an idiom we use to express when someone experiences the result of past actions. So the past action there is the sowing, the planting of the seeds, and experiencing the result is the reap, the harvest, when you collect in the plant. So we'll make that clear, make that in bold. And I'll make these notes available for download below the video at the end of the stream. All right, the next one we have is don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a book by its cover. So I think we all know what a book is. The cover is the outside of the book that we can see here. And then we have this idea of judge, which is looking at something and making a decision about it. Is it good or bad? Is it safe or dangerous? Is it useful or useless? So what do we think is the best definition for don't judge a book by its cover? Pallavi says number 4. And Patrick says this is a literal idiom. I don't think it's that literal, actually. You could use it to talk about books, but often it's used to talk about other things. Yes, Pallavi and Manuel, you are right. So this is number 4. You cannot know what something is really like by appearance. And you may also hear the expression, which is not particularly idiomatic, but actually is quite literal, which is the expression, appearances can be deceptive. All right, let's move on to number 3. Too many cooks spoil the broth. And you can see this happening in the picture. So cooks, that's a noun to mean a person who does the cooking. It's quite unusual in English that we have a noun form that means the person, and it doesn't have the ER on the end. Like often when we have these noun forms for people, we have things like teacher or driver, where we take the noun and then we put an ER on the end. But cook is an exception to that, where if we put ER on cook, we have cooker, that actually means the unit, the furniture, the appliance you have in your kitchen, which you cook things with. We don't use cooker for people. We use it for the thing in the kitchen. And so when we're talking about the person, then we use cook. So too many cooks is too many people who cook. And then we have this idea of spoiling the broth. So what is the broth? The broth is kind of like the soup that you use with meat or vegetables. So it's like the liquid part of a soup or stew when you have meat or vegetables. That's the broth. And spoil means it makes it go bad. So that's too many cooks spoil the broth. And as you folks in chat are getting here with number 3, you're absolutely right. Too many people doing the same thing can cause a bad result. Now, Pallavi has asked an interesting question here saying chefs. So there is a difference between a cook and a chef, where a cook is someone who cooks, and that can be professionally, like a teacher. A chef is something kind of above that, because a chef has a specific qualification to be a chef. So I suppose you could see this as the difference between a healer and a doctor, or you might see it as the difference between an educator and a university professor, a cook and a chef. A cook can be a profession, Pallavi, but in order to be a chef, you need to have a specific chef qualification, which takes quite a number of years to achieve. I think one of the distinctions between a cook and a chef is that a chef is someone who actually writes the recipes, whereas a cook is more someone who follows the recipes. I think Manuel puts it quite well to say that the chefs are the master in the kitchen, It's a little bit like that. Okay, let's move on to the next one. And you can see we're using the British version here. Can't see the woods for the trees. Can't see the woods for the trees. Notice it's this must have an S on it. The woods, not the wood. Can't see the woods for the trees. The woods, that's the British word for forest. So basically you can't see the forest because the trees are in the way. So if we look at our list of definitions, which one do you think best suits? Pallavi says, I can cook for myself. I don't need a degree. That's right, Pallavi. So in that sense, you could say that you are a cook, but you're not a chef. So can't see the woods for the trees. This means that you're not able to understand something because you're too involved in it. And the way you're involved can be in different ways. It can be that you have some emotional investment, or it's just something you're a part of, or it can be really like that you are just physically too close to something. You're looking at something too closely, so you can't see the woods for the trees. Okay, and then we have our last one, which is shooting from the hip. Shooting from the hip. And you can see the hip here is in the picture. This is like the top of someone's leg. And if you're shooting properly, this is not the correct place to shoot from, because it's very difficult to aim if you're shooting from the hip. However, what's the advantage of shooting from the hip? Well, the thing about shooting from the hip is it's quicker. So that's right. Shooting from the hip is the idea of reacting quickly without thinking. And we can also use it to mean like making a quick judgment or giving a quick opinion on something without really looking at it in detail, without being too careful about how you make that judgment. You can use it very quickly. You can make a quick judgment about something, and that can be shooting from the hip. So we're going to have some practice with these now. Just before we do, let's just have a quick reminder of these 5 idioms. So we start with you reap what you sow, which means experience the results of past actions, represented as in the idiom as basically what you plant is what you get later after you've planted it. The plant grows and you take whatever comes from that, whether that's a bad thing or a good thing. Then we have don't judge a book by its cover, which is the idea of not knowing what something is really like by appearance. Too many cooks spoil the broth, which means that too many people doing the same thing can cause a bad result. In other words, sometimes it's better to have less people doing the same thing. We have can't see the woods for the trees, which means you're too involved or too close to something to be able to really see what's going on or really understand a situation. And shooting from the hip, which means reacting quickly without thinking. So, here are some situations, 1, 2, and 3, and I'd like to know which of the idioms are good to be used in those situations. So, which of those 5 idioms can you use in these situations? Number 1, Tom quickly answered the teacher's question without thinking, and his answer was completely wrong. Number 2, the school project had 10 students working on it, and everyone had different ideas, so nothing was done properly. And number 3, Sarah thought James was lazy because he dressed casually, but he turned out to be the top student in the class. Can you remember which idioms might be appropriate for each of those situations? And it might help us actually if we have a little reminder of what those idioms are at the bottom. So let me put that for you. I'm not going to put them in the right form. I'll just put them in a very simple infinitive form. So shoot from the hip, reap what you sow, judge a book by its cover. Too many cooks. And can't see the woods. So just some reminders about what they were at the bottom, just to help you remember the idioms that we looked at. Do we have any answers for number 1 yet? Hello, Sylvia. Good to see you. You were in Wales. What did you do in Wales? So what do you think about number 1? Tom quickly answered the question without thinking, and his answer was completely wrong. It seems no one has mentioned about that one yet. A lot of people are giving suggestions for number 2 and number 3, but we don't have any suggestions for number 1. So number 1 is shooting from the hip. We might say that Tom was shooting from the hip. Okay, situation number 2, the school project had 10 students working on it and everyone had different ideas, so nothing was done properly. Too many cooks spoil the broth. Ten students is too many for a school project. And number 3, Sarah thought James was lazy because he dressed casually, but he turned out to be the top student in the class. Of course, don't judge a book by its cover. Okay, let's have 3 more situations. Get ready. You can look at these situations and then type what you think are the best idioms to use in each situation. So here are the situations, 4, 5, and 6. Number 4, Emma spent hours focusing on the font and colors for her presentation, but forgot to check the actual content. Number 5, Jake never studied for exams, and now he's failing all his subjects. And number 6, the manager made an important decision without consulting anyone, and it backfired. Okay, so let's start with some answers because Julia has one already. Julia says for number 4, can't see the woods for the trees. That's right. So Emma was focusing too much on the font and colors and the presentation, but didn't really look at the content, which is obviously much more important. She was focusing too much on the details. She couldn't see the woods for the trees. And for number 5, Jake never studied for exams and now he's failing all his subjects. And Manuel says, you reap what you sow. That's right. And then the manager made an important decision without consulting anyone, and it backfired. So I think we could potentially give two options here, which is you reap what you sow as one option, and the other option could be he was shooting from the hip. Because he made a decision without consultation. All right, very good, everyone. Let's move on to the next three. So, number 7, a group of designers worked on the company's new logo, but since everyone wanted something different, the result was terrible. Number 8, the CEO dismissed the new intern because she looked too young, but she turned out to be a marketing genius. And number 9, the sales team focused so much on minor product details that they forgot to check if customers actually wanted to buy it. So which of the idioms do you think are the best for those situations? I'll just give you another 30 seconds or so to think about that. If you're watching the video later, then remember to hit the like button and hit subscribe. And if you're joining us live, then say hello in the chat. So well done to Julia, Manuel, and Pallavi. For number 7, they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. A group of designers worked on the company's new logo, but since everyone wanted something different, the result was terrible. Number 8, the CEO dismissed the new intern because she looked too young, but she turned out to be a marketing genius. And we have, don't judge a book by its cover. And number 9, the sales team focused so much on minor product details that they forgot to check if customers actually wanted to buy it. You can't see the woods for the trees. Focusing too much on the details, not checking the really overall picture, the important things. Okay, let's do a few more of these, and then I'll answer some questions. Okay, number 10. The company ignored customer complaints for years. Now they're losing business. Number 11, Lisa sent a rude text to her friend without thinking. Now they aren't speaking. And number 12, 5 people tried to organize a surprise party, but they kept arguing and it ended up being a mess. We'll just wait 30 seconds or so. In case anyone is watching the video later, you can pause this to have some time to think about your answers. Okay, so number 10. The company ignored customer complaints for years and now they're losing business. You reap what you sow. Number 11. Lisa sent a rude text to her friend without thinking and now they aren't speaking. Yes, I'd say that's shooting from the hip. This is the without thinking part, isn't it? And then number 12, 5 people tried to organize a surprise party, but they kept arguing and it ended up being a mess. Too many cooks spoil the broth. I think Pallavi makes a good point here, saying that shooting from the hip and reap what you sow sounds similar. I think that's because of the example situations. I think that the idioms themselves are not necessarily similar, but there is some overlap because obviously we can often imagine a situation where shooting from the hip leads to a negative consequence. And because of that, it seems appropriate to say you reap what you sow. However, shooting from the hip does not have to have that negative consequence. In fact, you can use it as a hedging phrase, which is a way of softening your opinion, where you might say, well, I think, and I'm just shooting from the hip, I think, and then you give your opinion. And the idea is that you're using that then as a hedging phrase to say, hey, I haven't thought about this in great detail, but here's my quick take, my quick opinion on the situation. So, of course, there is some apparent overlap with doing that, but they are certainly not the same. Let's do one more set of practices for this. So here's another 3 sentences. Number 13. Mike didn't talk to the new neighbor because he looked unfriendly, but he later found out he was really kind. Number 14. Anna got so obsessed with picking the perfect birthday present for her sister that she forgot to actually buy one. And number 15. Sam was always kind and helpful, and now his friends are always there for him when he needs them. So, Pallavi, really quick on that one, and Julia and Manuel. Number 13 is, of course, don't judge a book by its cover. And number 14, Anna obsessed with picking the perfect birthday present. She forgot to actually buy one. That is definitely, she can't see the wood. She can't see the woods for the trees. She can't see the forest for the trees in American English. And then number 15, Sam was always kind and helpful, and now his friends are always there for him when he needs them. You reap what you sow. And there we have a nice example of you reap what you sow being used in a positive way. So that's nice. Because, of course, we do often use the phrase you reap what you sow in a negative way. However, it can be used to talk about positive consequences. So doing some productive and positive work and getting something positive out of that. And hello to Younes, since he said hello in the chat. A few more people have just joined, so I feel like we're going to just do a few more examples so they can get an idea of the idioms we've looked at today. So here's 3 more. Number 16, Jenny quickly blamed her brother for breaking the vase, but later she realized she'd done it herself. Number 17, the charity event had too many organizers giving different instructions, so everything was confusing. And number 18, Ben avoided joining a club because he thought it was boring, but when he finally joined, he loved it. So these are your last 3, and after these, I'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions in the chat about today's class or about English learning or education in general. So if you have any questions like that right now, you can start typing those in the chat, and we will start talking about your questions, and I'll give you my opinion, answer those questions as best as I can. Does no one want to give an idiom for number 16? So we have some suggestions for 17, which is too many cooks spoil the broth. The charity event had too many organisers giving different instructions. And number 18, don't judge a book by its cover. Ben avoided joining a club because he thought it was boring, but when he finally joined, he loved it. So how about 16? Okay. I'll give you my option then. So for number 16, I think this is shooting from the hip. So she sees the broken vase, blames her brother because he always breaks everything without really thinking about it, without examining the vase, without considering the situation. But then later, when she looks at the situation in more detail, she realizes that, oh, actually, I broke it. And so that would be shooting from the hip for number 16. Okay, everybody, let's move on to question time, questions and notes. So if you have any questions about English learning, you can type those in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. I will make the notes for today's class available and I will give you the download link for that in just a moment. In the meantime, if you have any questions about learning English, you can type those in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. Right. Just give me a moment, folks, to upload the notes from today's class. Pallavi says, why have you finished so early today? Well, I haven't finished yet, Pallavi. I'm still here to answer questions. So if you have any questions, you can type those in the chat. And I'll do my best to answer them. And I will stay as long as I've got questions or until the questions get not particularly interesting. What does Julia say? He didn't pull his punches. He's shooting from the hip. Are these two the same meaning? Oh, I don't think they're the same meaning at all, Julia. I think they're very different. Shooting from the hip is about making a quick reaction without careful consideration. But not pulling punches means not holding back with an attack or criticism. So those are quite different. If we say he didn't pull his punches, that means he was very critical, for example, without holding back his criticism. Don't throw the baby with the bathwater. You're missing a few words there, Manuel. So it's don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And actually, we don't need the don't. It's just throw out the baby with the bathwater. People might say stuff like, we have to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Or if we do this, then we'll throw the baby out with the bathwater. Or we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is the idea. This is often used when we want to change or get rid of something. It doesn't need to be a physical thing. It can be a procedure, a rule, or maybe we're making an organizational or institutional reaction to something. And if we overreact, then we can cause more of a problem. So it's like we want to get rid of the bathwater, but if we overreact to this situation, then we may also get rid of the baby. So it's kind of saying throw the baby out with the bathwater is like an overreaction to a situation, which therefore causes more harm. So by trying to solve a problem, the problem is the bathwater. We want to get rid of the bathwater. By trying to solve a problem, we actually end up throwing out the baby. For example, I might often say that students study grammar too much, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. When I say that people study too much grammar, that doesn't mean you should never study grammar. That doesn't mean that grammar is not useful. That doesn't mean that grammar exercises are not useful. I think all of those things are useful. Grammar exercises are useful. Understanding grammar is useful. Studying grammar is useful and interesting. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Pallavi says, I have a question, but it's not related to English. My college is organising annual sports 2025. I took part in a 100-metre sprint, throwing and shot put. I'm thinking if I made a bad decision. What do you mean made a bad decision? You mean you don't want to take part, Pallavi? I mean, I'm sure you can withdraw if you feel you've entered too many competitions, right? Or what do you mean by bad decision? Do you mean you chose the wrong thing? I think I'm going to like move where I am here. So I always get covered by the actual questions. Because it would be embarrassing if I make any mistakes like falling while running. I wouldn't worry about that, Pallavi. That's just part of sports. Just have fun. Pachu says, how are idioms taught in the UK? Are there classes? No, it doesn't really work like that, Pachu. So languages always have idioms and expressions. Idioms are natural parts of language which develop culturally, and people learn them through exposure. One of the interesting things that we see with the use of idioms is that the older someone is, the more idioms they use. So young people actually use less idioms than older people. And people who get older use more and more idioms. So your language becomes more and more idiomatic as you get older. And so we can see from this that idioms are something which you learn through experience with the language and even cultural experience, because some idioms are unique to geographic areas or cultures, which is why you have like American idioms, British idioms, you have idioms from parts of the UK, which you don't hear in other parts of the UK, and things like that. Idioms are very much just a natural part of language, which people normally learn through exposure to the language. So they are not I mean, there might be like an English literature class which does some analysis of idioms, but you certainly wouldn't have classes teaching you idioms. And remember again that there is a difference between learning about a language and learning how to use a language. Learning about a language you might do in a classroom, analyzing a language and talking about the meaning of things. But this is a very different thing than actually practicing the skill of speaking and listening and how to do the language. Julia says shooting from the hip has two meanings. One is to speak in a direct and honest way. Second is to react quickly. That's interesting, Julia. That might be true. I'm just going to shoot from the hip. Yeah, for me personally, it's the second one. However, I won't rule out the first one. It also might be the Americans might use it a bit more in the first sense. That's possible. For me, it very much means reacting quickly without thinking. However, we do often use it for opinions in the hedging sense that I spoke about before. And in that way, you could use it as a hedging phrase for giving a direct and honest opinion. Like, I'm just going to shoot from the hip here, but, I think you need to add more red to your website, right? And it's like I'm just giving you my kind of quick, direct opinion, and I'm using the expression there to make it more polite. And we have Dr. Archu, who says, "Hey Rich, how are you? Happy to see you after a long time." Hello there, Dr. Archu. How are you doing? I mean, I've been here. Have you been doing other things? We stream basically every week. I try my best to at least stream on Saturdays once a week. So we are in Q&A, everybody. So if you have any questions, now is the time. I will do my best to answer any questions that you have about English or about anything related to education. Today's lesson was about idioms, and we talked about the idioms shoot from the hip, can't see the woods for the trees, too many cooks spoil the broth, don't judge a book by its cover. Dr. Archer is busy in college and hospital life. Yeah, never mind. I should probably do some more medical classes because there's quite a few people involved in medicine who watch the channel. I don't really know why that is, but especially, yeah, especially from other parts of the world, we have quite a few doctors and medical researchers who stop by. Pallavi is asking about strategies for winning sports competitions. I don't think you're asking the right person, Pallavi. I really couldn't give you any advice about that at all. I think probably practicing a lot helps. Anawat says, what would you say? He's a friend of Rich or he's a friend of Rich's? Oh, well, that is an interesting question, isn't it? You can say both. And I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why. But both of those actually sound okay. I think in speech, I would actually prefer to use the second one with the apostrophe. He's a friend of Rich's, which is interesting because grammatically that doesn't quite seem right. I think grammatically it would make more sense to say he's a friend of Rich. But people certainly do say the second one. Did you hear someone say this, Anua? It's quite an interesting one. Any idioms from movies like the MCU? You should see idioms in movies. I mean, they're just a part of natural speech, you know? They come up every now and again. So a good script writer should have a few idioms in there. I did a stream once where we had clips from movies and we had a look at expressions being used in movies, and it got copyright claimed. So I haven't done that since then. I think that's quite unfortunate because I think an educational class is a perfectly reasonable way to use that sort of material. However, unfortunately, the system is not complex enough. You might say that the YouTube copyright system shoots from the hip. Pyorka says, I'm between the devil and the deep sea because my office colleague says she will kill me without any reason. Not quite sure what the context is there, Pyorka. But the idea of being in between the devil and the deep sea is that you have two options which are not particularly good options. So, how's everyone's English learning going at the moment? What sort of difficulties are you having with learning English at the moment? I think probably the best thing, Pallavi, would be not to worry about that. I don't think whether you win or you lose, it's not, that's not really part of it. Just do it. And if you don't really want to do it, you don't have to do it. Remember that. It is just for fun, isn't it? I mean, are they forcing you to take part in those competitions? So this week, I've been playing a lot of a video game. Because if you remember rightly, last week was my birthday. So I bought myself a new video game. And that video game is called Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I can show the trailer because um, there is a bit of quite a lot of colourful language in this game. So I don't think it would be appropriate. But it's a really lovely adventure game which has historical representations of 16th or 15th century Bavaria. It's very, very cool. Lots of historical attention to detail has gone into it. You can see there the armor and the costumes of the characters. These are fully customizable. Very, very interesting, fun game with lots of historical accuracy. All right, folks, I guess we don't particularly have any other questions, so I am going to wrap up. So thank you very much for joining me today. Things are a little bit hectic at the moment. So as Pallavi noticed, the stream was a little bit short. I'll just do what I can to prepare material and keep at least having a weekly stream. And then hopefully in the future, we'll have the opportunity to have some more detailed topics. I am always open to suggestions, and it does help me to think about what to do topics on when I get questions. So do feel free to post a question in the comments or make a request for a topic, particularly if you become a member of the channel. Then I will absolutely pay attention to any suggestions or recommendations that you make and try to have a bit of a think about that. I hope that everyone has interesting weekend plans. Yeah, well noticed, Pure Care. It's because of the weather. The weather here is very cold and very dry at the moment. So, yeah, I have a bit of chapped lip from the dryness and the coldness of the weather. This is just what happens when you have like quick changes in the weather. Then you get this kind of stuff, but it will clear up. It's not very sore. Yes, you're right, Pallavi. I really just don't like products like that. I just don't like products like lip balm. All right, folks. Oh, what's this? What's the difference between chorus and what verse? They are parts of a song. The chorus is like the kind of the main part of the song, which repeats like on 2 or 3 occasions throughout the song. You go back to the chorus, and the verses tend to be unique. So you have verse 1, chorus, verse 2, chorus, verse 3, chorus. Or you have verse 1, verse 2, chorus, verse 3, chorus. So they're just different, talking about different parts of a song, and there are different ways of structuring a song. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for watching today. I hope you have a lovely weekend and a lovely rest of your week. And I'll see you next Saturday at about 2 p.m. UK time. All right. See you all next week. Bye-bye. Bye for now.